This is the best phone that I've ever used in my life. I've been using the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra for a couple weeks now, and I'm completely amazed. It has a beautiful design, a beautiful software here with One UI 7, and needless to say, it is faster than you could ever need. As an iPhone user, Apple fanboy that has been dismissing Android phones in general for being too buggy, yes, I admit it, I was one of those people. Something that left me absolutely speechless is how well optimized this phone is. I really thought Apple had an edge when it comes to software optimization, but it is simply not the case. Especially now with iOS 18, which has been one of the worst software updates we've had in a long time, I would say the difference now favors the green side, at least when it comes to Samsung phones. During the time that I've been using the S25 Ultra, I have not encountered any bugs, issues, or even micro stutters when moving around the system. It is hard to believe as an iPhone fanboy, but this just works. It is almost perfect. And I have to say, this is kind of embarrassing for Apple, you know? Not just because they say their software and hardware are perfectly optimized for the best possible experience, but also because they barely make any phones. I think they make the normal iPhone, they make the Pro iPhone, and then they now make, I think, the iPhone E, which is the most affordable alternative. While, on the other hand, Samsung makes, 20, 30, 40 phones a year? I'm not really sure. So theoretically, if there was a company that would compromise on optimization, it should be Samsung. But once again, after having used both devices as my personal phone for a while, I can tell you that Samsung has the clear edge. I have not had any issues with this phone, but I have had noticeable and plenty issues with the iPhone. Once again, caused by the lackluster upgrade, which has been iOS 18. Now, more in that line, I feel like the new S25 Ultra has a very good looking design. It uses the same premium materials we can see on the iPhone, even down to the texture and the finish. Matte glass on the back, brushed titanium on the sides, and an edge-to-edge display with very thin frames. Of course, this is a very subjective aspect. I cannot tell you which one looks better, because that, of course, depends on personal preference. But I can tell you that both feel equally premium in the hand. I feel like the main practical difference here are the edges, with the iPhone having very rounded edges and S25 Ultra having very sharp, maybe not as sharp as the S24 or S23 Ultra, but they are still pretty sharp. It's a very clear rectangle instead of a, less sharp rectangle here on the iPhone. And actually here comes my first complaint about the S25 Ultra, which is that even though it looks very good and it feels very, very good, it is a very premium device, it is also absolutely massive. With 6.9 inches, it is almost impossible to use with one hand unless you're a basketball player. And that's the reason why I also bought the S25, which has a much smaller 6.2-inch display, closer to the one on the iPhone 16 Pro. I believe this is the perfect size for a phone, at least in my opinion. You can use it comfortably with one hand while having a big enough phone to consume videos or play video games. Now, the issue here is that if you buy the S25, not the Ultra, you're also buying a less quality device with aluminum instead of titanium. You're buying less quality cameras, and it also doesn't have the latest display technologies like we can find on the flagship. So yeah, it is a weird trade-off that you have to make. I'm not really sure why they don't make a smaller Ultra, but yeah, in my opinion, the S25 Ultra is too big. But I guess if they make it this big, it's because most people prefer it to be so big. So not even an issue. It's more of a personal thing. Something that I was very glad to hear was that Samsung is now officially supporting their new phones with up to 7 years of software updates. So technically, the S25 Ultra will be up to date until 2032. Something that makes me feel very, very old. Right now, as I said, it is running the newly released One UI 7, and of course, performance has been stellar. I'm curious to see how well they manage future updates, since one of the main criticisms with Samsung phones has been their poor and unreliable support for older devices. In fact, last year's S24 Ultra still doesn't have an official update for the new OS. This is an issue that we simply don't have with the iPhone. Even though iOS 18 is not the best software update, it came out on time for every supported device all at once. That is something we've never seen Samsung do with any of their previous lineups. Even as I said, the S24 Ultra, which came out last year, and it's the best phone that came out in 2024, still is not good enough to get a on-time scheduled release. I think the One UI 7 upgrade was supposed to come out last month, and we still don't have it. It is only available for the S25 Ultra. So yeah, even though in the devices that support One UI 7 right now, it works really well, it is kind of a shame to see that there's not a clear upgrade path for any of the other older devices. I'm not really sure what's going to happen with this phone next year. Maybe it gets the upgrade in February, maybe it gets it in March, maybe in June. We don't really know because there's not a clear schedule for these kinds of phones. Now, I think the biggest misconception I had as an iPhone user was that Samsung phones don't have a good ecosystem. People talk about the Apple ecosystem all the time and how their devices magically connect to one another with features like universal copy and paste or phone calls across Apple devices. People say that the Apple ecosystem is the only one you should consider and that it's the best by far. But I'm here today to say that is not true. Samsung has, in my opinion, an equally useful and versatile ecosystem with most of the features you can find on iOS. Did you know that Samsung makes their own earbuds, watches, laptops, and tablets, just like Apple? Did you know that Samsung also makes their own displays and TVs? Did you know that they have their own version of AirDrop with Quick Share and Phone Link? It is very hard to find a single feature on the Apple ecosystem that's not available in some way on the Samsung ecosystem. In fact, I would argue that Samsung's ecosystem is actually a little bit better because first off, they have more devices like their new rings or their home appliances that you could also connect to your phone, adding more functionality. You then also have more features inside of the ecosystem, like for example, Samsung DeX, which is my favorite feature on Samsung phones by far. You can essentially turn the phone into a full-blown computer by simply connecting it with a USB-C port to any display or TV. And then with either a keyboard and mouse or a controller, you can do essentially the same things you can do on your normal computer. The only downside is that you're limited to Android apps, but most things people do on their daily lives with their computers are also available on Android. They just need a slightly bigger display and then maybe a keyboard and mouse for a better typing experience. But as I said, for 90% of people, you could probably replace your computer with a simple phone thanks to Samsung DeX. Oh, and even better, you also have access to the entire Android ecosystem because, of course, on top of being a Samsung phone, it is also an Android phone, so you can connect it to Samsung earbuds or, in general, any Android earbuds. You can connect it to Samsung watches or, in general, any Android watches, and that with pretty much every other device. Now, if you watched the video that I made last year about the S24 Ultra, you know that my biggest issue, as stupid as it sounds, was that there is not a good Apple Notes alternative for Samsung phones. They are either locked to specific devices like Samsung Notes or too limited like Google Keep. That is actually the reason why I couldn't fully switch to the S24 Ultra last year. I heavily rely on my Notes app for everything that I do. For scheduling, for planning, for researching, and even for scripting. The very video that you're watching right now has been scripted using Apple Notes. But luckily, 3 weeks ago, yes, I'm not kidding, that was just 3 weeks ago, I discovered Notion, an app that is not necessarily meant to do just notes. It is much more complex, but that I can technically use as my notes app. It lets me create folders, it lets me create folder clusters as deep as I want, and it syncs between all of my devices for free. Now, I don't think I should spend too much time talking about this, but as you probably expected, performance on this phone is insane. Everything loads up fast and works as you would expect. In fact, on Geekbench, it boasts almost 9,000 multi-core points, which is very close to the performance of my own computer I'm using to edit this video on. But at the same time, this is also what I can say about the iPhone. I would say that nowadays performance discussion is absolutely insane, considering that both phones are as fast as you could ever need, and then double that, essentially. They are insanely fast for doing phone activities like watching TikToks or playing your casual phone games. It makes absolutely no sense to buy one of these two phones because it has a slightly higher Geekbench score. That's not something you'll ever notice in any way. And well, that is essentially what I can say about the cameras. There was a time when Samsung phones had much different cameras with 10x zooms and higher megapixel counts, but nowadays both phones have essentially the same cameras. You know, they both have the 1x, the 0.5x, and the 5x. They both have about the same megapixel count, excluding maybe the main camera on the S25 Ultra, which has 200 megapixels. But essentially, in every other way, they are both identical, even when it comes to the features. They both have 4K 120, they both have cinematic video, cinematic photo, they both can shoot in log for professional workflows. Besides a couple features that you get on Samsung phones and that you can get on the iPhone if you download a third-party app, they are essentially the same thing. In practical terms, they are really close. I don't think you should buy either phone because of the camera quality either. So, if you're watching this video from an Apple device, or if you're using an iPhone as your personal phone, I hope this video helped you realize that Samsung phones, maybe not all Samsung phones, but flagship Samsung phones, can be as good or better than iPhones, even on the things that traditionally iPhones were better than everybody else, like optimization and design. Of course, I'm not going to tell you that Samsung is clearly the best one by far, because there's many people who still prefer maybe iOS and the way that it feels and the designs, and Apple products like the MacBook that, work really well with the iPhone. So yeah, you can still use an iPhone and it's a really good device. But once again, if you were on the fence, if you're attracted by the idea of getting a Samsung phone with Android and, tweaking with all the settings, getting access to a lot more functionalities, but you were not really sure about performance, you were not really sure about, maybe optimization, for example, you should know that those things are really good on Samsung phones, even better this year at least than on the iPhone. The only big issue remains to be the same: iMessage. If you have an iPhone, you can text blue bubbles to your friends. And if you have an Android phone of any kind, you have to stick to green bubbles instead. Many people, unfortunately, live that reality. They need the blue bubbles because the green bubbles are weird. As stupid as it sounds, that is the case with many people. I'm pretty sure that's why Apple sells so many phones to teenagers in the US. There's, of course, alternatives like Beeper that you should try if you want to use a Samsung phone and you live in the US and you still want to be cool. But I'm not really sure that is the type of person that would want to make the switch. Once again, this video is for those of you who are on the fence, that are not sure if this is a good idea. And I'm here to tell you, once again, that this is a good idea. It is a really good phone. You've seen it throughout the video. I don't have to say it again. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any remarks about it, please tell me in the comments. And I hope to see you again very soon in a new video. Peace.